Chelsea Jensen here. Today we are going to make a cinnamon roll focaccia with some dough that I started up last night, and then some skillet potatoes and a sausage, bacon, kind of pepper onion omelet. So last night I prepped up my focaccia. And I added a little bit of cinnamon in it, so it had a little bit of a cinnamon flavor in there as well. And then we did our stretch and folds, let it sit in our fridge overnight. And then this morning, I stretched it out into my pan with a little bit of olive oil. And then I put it in the oven at a proofing thing. So it keeps it at like 95 degrees to help it bubble faster. So now we are ready to make our cinnamon roll sauce for it and do the dimpling and get it popped in the oven. So we're going to start by melting 1 stick of butter. So a half a cup of butter or 1 stick. And then we're going to add 3/4 a cup of brown sugar. So this is a half a cup. So I'll do a half plus half of this. So 3/4 of a cup brown sugar. And then let me grab my little measuring spoons over here. We need our vanilla and our cinnamon. So our vanilla, we're going to use 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we're going to do 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. So we've got about a teaspoon of cinnamon in our dough already. And then this is going to be our little kind of cinnamon roll drizzle that we'll pour over the top and dimple. But we're going to use a whole tablespoon in here. And that's just going to give it all of that cinnamon roll flavor. And then I'm going to let that butter melt and that sugar kind of, we want to get the grit texture out of it until we can drizzle it over. So let's give it a good spoon or stir here with our spatula. Now we don't want to overcook the sugar syrup and turn it into candy, but we just want to kind of start cooking it. And then once it gets kind of that nice soft where there's no grit in it, then it'll be perfect to pour over. Let's get our bacon going. We're going to use half of our bacon for our skillet potatoes and half will go into our omelet. So I'm just going to get my kitchen shears out and just start by cutting this in half both ways. That way it's easier to do it like that. And then just use your kitchen shears and we're just going to snip the bacon into pieces. That way when they fry up our potatoes in them, they'll have that just nice, lovely bacon crunch in there and the great flavor. And I find it's easier to cut bacon with good kitchen shears than it is to do it with a cutting board and a knife. But again, bacon is going to go into our potatoes for our kind of skillet breakfast potatoes. And then we are going to make a bacon, sausage, pepper, and onion omelet to go with. And then, of course, we will bake up our sour or cinnamon roll focaccia that I made using my sourdough starter last night. So it's going to, have all the good benefits of sourdough. It was really, really simple to make. Just 200 grams of active starter to make our base. And then I added water, about 400 grams of water. And then about 500 grams of unbleached bread flour. And then about a teaspoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of salt. Okay, now that we have our bacon pretty much chopped up here, I'm going to wash my hands and we can get back to work. Okay, let's get these burners on because bacon always is the thing that takes like the longest to start cooking up. And I'm going to do them both over about a 6, so like a slightly above a medium, but not too high. Here, our butter is melting great, and we are getting the brown sugar. It's turning into this lovely, rich sauce. Here we go. I'm going to turn my heat down just a little because, again, I don't want it on too hot that I turn this into a delicious caramel instead of our cinnamon roll drizzle. Although it is getting into caramel season. Yeah, today we went to, after my daughter's soccer practice, we went to Home Depot to get a couple things for home project. And before I went there, I was like, oh, maybe they'll have Halloween decorations out. I'm like, Evie, you can pick out a Halloween decoration because typically they always put them out really, really early. Unfortunately, I was wrong and there was no Halloween decorations to be found. But I did find this really cool fall like gel mat for like $12. So I was like, winning to have by our sink. So at least there was something fruitful out of there. Okay, we're getting there just a little bit longer. Let's start by getting our potatoes kind of cut up here. I'm just going to take a little bit of the skin off on each of these just because my kids prefer a little less skin. You know, in their perfect world, there would be no skin. But if I just peel off like a part of it on each one, that like dramatically cuts down the amount of skin on there. Now you could just peel all of these up as well, but who wants to do all that work? So just gonna use take a little bit of off. These are really bumpy potatoes today. Okay, let's check on our sauce real quick. Looks like we are in business. I'm just gonna pull it here to the side for just a second because I'm gonna have to drizzle this over, but I don't want it to keep heating. Here we go. Now, here's for the fun part. Let me wash my hands because I got a little potato starch on them. And I like to do it with wet fingers in here so it doesn't stick to me. So it's nice and puffy. We are going to go in and dimple it, and then we will pour our cinnamon roll kind of goo over it. So I'm going to just really stick my fingers down in here. Ugh, it is still sticking to me. Let's do it with our little bit of our drizzle on. Very hot. Where's my oil? I'm just gonna do my fingers oil, then drizzle. I'm not patient to let my cinnamon roll drizzle cool down a little bit more. Okay, there we go. So now it's not sticking to me. We're gonna just kind of stick this in here, and I'm gonna pour this all over. So think about the gooey inside of a cinnamon roll. This is this like delicious stuff. So, and now that should go. You just want to make sure it goes into all of our little dimples here because this is where all that good flavor is going to come from. Okay, perfect. Let's wash the oil off my hands. And there we go. And we're going to give these a quick stir, and then we're going to put our cinnamon roll focaccia in the oven to start baking. So I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees, and it's going to cook for about 25 minutes in the oven, which should hopefully be perfect timing for everything else that we're making. Let's just give this a good stir. And the beautiful part about this is as this cooks, that it's going to rise and drizzle over, but it's just going to have so much flavor in it. So we've got it at 425 in here. And you always, again, want to do it on your top rack, not under something that's going to give it the best direct heat. And then we're going to put it for 25 minutes because you want to cook it enough that it gets that still kind of that crispy edging of it like that a focaccia has. But you don't want to overcook it to where you turn your cinnamon sugar mixture into like caramel candy. Okay, let's get our bacon Here, I'm going to turn these guys down again to about a 4 now that they're kind of nice and hot. And we're done with this guy. And let's get our potatoes and everything prepped up. For our cinnamon roll focaccia that's baking in the oven right now, we will make a vanilla glaze to go on top of it. So we'll just have, again, that nice kind of cinnamon roll frosting flavor for it too. So I'm just cutting off the ends of each one. And since I want my, skillet potatoes to cook up fairly quickly today, I'm going to make them nice kind of smaller cubing. The bigger your potato, the longer it's going to take to cook and to get soft. Now, I find for making skillet potatoes, you really don't need a whole lot of potatoes. One potato, and we're using 2 today, makes a lot of skillet potatoes. So always, I said, cut them up one at a time, and then you'll see exactly how much you need. There we go. And then we're going to put also peppers and onions in our skillet potatoes as well, just to give them that nice little flavoring. And then lastly, we'll season them up at the very end. I always like to season up my potatoes towards the end when I'm frying them so that the spices don't get burned on the bottom of the pan. And if you just add those spices right at the end, you're going to get that nice flavor in it. And you'll still get a great crisp on them, but no burnt spices. So again, nice little smaller ones. That way it cooks up faster and gets a nice good crisp on it too. Now I'm using russet. You can also use like a Yukon Gold or red potatoes. All of those work well for skillet potatoes. It's not like some potatoes are better for other things and, different things that you cook, like in soups. If you want the body of the potato to stay, you want to use like a Yukon Gold or a red potato or new potato. I prefer russets for mashed potatoes because they give me a fluffier mashed potato. But with these, they all actually work really well. I'm going to cut up an onion here. We're going to actually use half of this onion for our skillet potatoes and half of it for our omelets. Yeah, my older son, he was like, "Oh, can you put peppers in the omelet?" And I was like, "Sure, but I'm going to put onions too." And he's like, "Oh, but not red onions." And I was like, "No red onions are going into the omelets." I said, he's like, "But will you caramelize them?" I was like, "Yep, I'll caramelize them, make sure they have good flavor." And that's kind of my trick with omelets. And I feel like that's what a lot of places don't do, is they don't pre-cook their veggies. I always pre-saute up my veggies for my omelets because I think it gives it a much better flavor. You're not going to get that bitterness of like the raw peppers or onions. And I feel like the texture is even better as well because it's not as crunchy in there. Okay, let's put this over my burner here. Okay, we're going to add in, and for the skillet potatoes, actually, one second. Let me grab a little bit of a plate here, or a bowl. We're going to pull out our bacon so that once it crisps up, so it doesn't get too kind of chewy or like overcooked. I'm going to actually add a smidge of butter here. So if you ever get where your bacon is not crisping up nicely, it's because it doesn't have enough fat. So you see how I don't have a puddle of fat on the bottom of my pan to crisp it up in? I just need to add a little bit more, and then my bacon will crisp up nicer instead of be chewy or burnt. And it's because if I split the bacon between 2 pans, because I want the bacon grease kind of in both, but that means there's less fat in it, and this is a bigger pan. So just adding in a little bit more grease or the butter is going to allow it to crisp up nicely for the bacon. Here we go. So we're going to let that crisp up. And while we're doing that, I'm going to prep my peppers here. So we're going to use, again, sweet peppers. I have a whole bunch of them. You can also use a bell pepper. I personally prefer sweet peppers over bell peppers because I think they're a little less bitter in flavor. Um, but you could use, a bell pepper if you wanted. If I am going to use bell peppers, I typically stick with the red, orange, and yellow ones because they're a bit sweeter and less bitter as well. Let's grab these out. But, the other day I was thinking we always have sweet peppers along, and I keep seeing these like chili or jalapeno poppers, but I don't like spicy foods at all. And I was like, ooh, I should try to make jalapeno poppers one day, but make them like sweet pepper poppers. I think that would be so good, especially if you're like a spice baby, and maybe just put like a little bit of diced up jalapeno in there so you have a little bit of spice, but not like catch your mouth on fire from it. And I was like, I feel like that would be delicious. There's one of those things where I'm like, I always see those at like an appetizer at certain places, and I'm like, oh, I really wish I liked spicy things because I think I would like those. Okay, let's give our bacon. You can see right now we're getting this nice crisp up on it, which is great. Same here.
Yeah, question. Do the kids eat peppers and spicy things?
My kids don't really eat spicy things at all, except Evie. Evie will eat like wasabi almonds. She loves them. She has like strange foods. And Evie loves sweet peppers, like straight up. I put them in her lunch every single day. But my other kids, Torn likes peppers cooked. He always asks for them. He likes them cooked. So they do, but nobody really likes spicy things. But I feel like young kids, a lot of times, they don't start to like spicy things until they're older. And it has like your taste buds. So when you're younger, you have a lot more taste buds than when you're older. And so I think that's why when you get older, you like, more stronger flavors than when you are a kid. Okay, we're going to grab out our bacon here in our pan because it is looking pretty good on the crispiness part. I don't want it to be super crunchy crispy. We are going to throw it back in the pan with our skillet potatoes, but I don't want it so crunchy that you're like got like a rock in there. Sometimes bacon gets a little too firm. Here we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in my onions, and we're going to let them start to saute up. I'm just going to get the majority of these. If there's a little bit in here, that's fine. And then we'll toss them back into our potatoes. So I'm going to put half of our onions in here. Start kind of getting a nice caramelization up. Over here, I'm going to throw in some sausages real quick to cook them up. And then we're just going to throw all of our vegetables and kind of saute them together because they're all going to be stuffed inside our omelet. Now, I'm using just pre-cooked sausages that once they get like heating up, they'll cook up well. But you could use like, uncooked sausages. Let's see, we'll do one more. So we're just going to let them get soft, and then I will break them up with my spatula so that there'll be chunks, and then we'll add in our veggies for this. But my kids love it when I cook sausages in bacon grease. They say it gives the sausage this little crispy shell, which they just think is amazing. It's funny because before this camping trip this summer, my oldest daughter was like, I don't like, sausages. And then I kept cooking them in the bacon grease over the summer, and she was like, oh, sausages are my favorite. And I was like, yeah, they were delicious. I had a feeling that you just didn't like them, microwaved or whatnot. Everything's better when it's cooked in bacon. So, okay, we're going to just do a smaller kind of dice on these, similar to our onions. I'm just going to first kind of go through and cut them. Now, I find that with peppers, onions, and tomatoes, if you find that your knife is slipping on them, when you cut, you just need to sharpen it up. Your knife is just dull. And if you cut your peppers from the inside, using that rough kind of surface as a grip on your knife, you're less likely to slide, and it cuts through the skin a little bit easier. We're running out of space on my cutting board. And I tell my knife needs a good sharpening because it is starting to slip and slide a little bit. I say I probably sharpen my knives every 2 weeks or so, just because I do a lot of cutting, and it, they just get a little bit dull, and they're not like super dull, but I like them to be really sharp. Okay, let's get our peppers toasting up here, and I'm just doing a little kind of just a beginning toast up on the peppers for our skillet potatoes, because once we add those potatoes in there, they're not going to get nearly as much direct heat, and when you can get a good saute on it, you're going to bring out those flavors. Let's get these, and then we'll toss. They're just about, and then we got to whip up our glaze for our sourdough cinnamon roll focaccia, which I've been, I'm really excited for. Normally I always do a savory focaccia with dinner, like, because it's just like an easy thing. If I don't have like a sourdough prepped, I can make it, like prep it at lunchtime, and it's always ready to bake up at dinner time. But this is the first time I've actually did like an overnight one in the fridge for breakfast. So I've done sweet ones before, but I'm just excited because I haven't done one quite like this. And I kind of did a similar, can't speak today, drizzle that I've done on some other things. So it's kind of incorporate it. And then I feel like adding the extra cinnamon in our focaccia dough is going to give it an even more cinnamon flavor. Okay. Our sausages here are just about cut, kind of chopped up. So we're going to throw in our onions. We'll let them have a quick minute to saute up. And then we'll add in our peppers. And again, I saute up my vegetables before I add them into my omelets because it takes away that sharpness. It takes away the crunch of the vegetables, which can be, I feel like, a little off-putting, and the bitterness, especially like peppers, like green peppers. If you use those, they're a bit more bitter if you don't cook them up. Okay, now that our peppers have a good hot minute in here, let's add in our 2 big russet potatoes that we diced up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to toss them around in the grease until every potato is kind of covered up in that. And that's because the potatoes are very porous and they'll soak up the grease. So if you don't kind of toss them right away, then some parts won't get it on them, and then that part won't get a nice crisp on it. So just make sure you thoroughly toss it first, and then we will spread it out and lay it flat so it can crisp up. There we go. So they all should be about tossed in here. So now I'm going to grab my spatula, and then you want this nice crispy edge on them, just push them down. And this is why you also don't want to have so many potatoes that they can't all be touching the bottom of the pan. So we're going to push this down, and I've got it again over about medium heat 5. And then I'm going to put a lid over it, and we're going to allow it to crisp up and crunch. Now, if your lid doesn't have a hole to let steam out, then just leave it slightly off to let the steam out. The one thing I do love about the Hexclad is they have a little hole that lets steam come out. So this will give you that crisp bottom of it. It won't make it soggy, but will help make those insides of those potatoes a bit more tender. Okay, let's get our peppers in here. Take a little potato out. That would be not great to have a potato in my omelet. Okay, we got our peppers. We're going to give them a quick saute. And I'm going to just add just a little bit of garlic salt to our, sausage, peppers, onions mix here, but not too much because that bacon grease that we're cooked it in has a bit of saltiness and flavor on it. Now, if we're going to do some more substance vegetables like some zucchini or mushrooms, then I might do a little bit more seasoning. But going to keep it pretty simple for this and just a light amount, not too crazy. Because you don't need much, just want a little bit in there. There we go. Now I'm going to grab a plate to kind of spoon these out on. And then I'm going to grab a bowl for making our glaze. Now with this kind of base of our mixture here, I want to I'm going to use a slotted spatula, kind of let that grease strip out because I don't want to have greasy vegetables in my omelet. We're just going to let it kind of drip out, but I want to cook my omelet in it, that bacon grease, and it will just add so much delicious flavor to the outside of our omelet. So just use a slotted spatula or spoon to transfer these out, and that way you'll get the inside will be nice and non-greasy. I'm going to turn off my skillet here. We do the rest. And then another little trick that I have that helps make the inside of the omelet really delicious and like melted cheese is I'm going to sprinkle cheddar cheese over the top of these hot, bacon, sausage, and veggies, which will start it to melt, which then when I put it into the omelet, you don't have to overcook your eggs to try to get that cheese to melt. So it just gives it a head start on that process. There we go. And then let's see if I can scoop these last little bits out. And the lovely thing is, we have this residual bacon grease in here, which will also help create a non-stick surface for cooking our omelet. Okay, let's grab our cheddar cheese. And now you can use any cheese you want in here. My kids really love cheddar cheese in their omelets, but Gouda is also a really delicious option. You just want a cheese that has a good melting point. So we're just going to do a nice little sprinkle over it, and that residual heat will start the beginning melting process for this. Now I'm going to put in just a smidge more butter here. You always want to add the air on having just a bit more butter in the pan than not enough for our omelets. And then we're going to mix up this, and this is going to be our sausage, bacon, onion, pepper omelet with our cheddar cheese. And then we're going to work on our skillet potatoes, and then we're going to mix up our frosting glaze for our sourdough cinnamon roll focaccia. Now with omelets, you are going to want to whip up your eggs first before putting them in the pan. When I do a scramble, I'll just scramble my eggs in. I don't beat them in a bowl. But for an omelet, we want to beat them first. Okay, and I'm doing an 8-egg omelet, which I find works really well for my 10-inch pan. And I like my omelets a little bit thicker than, I don't like the super thin omelets where the egg gets kind of dry. I like a good thick, ooh, I got a double yolk, guys. Very exciting. I feel like you are very special when you get a double yolk. Those are always, try to find it. One time, now this was I didn't realize it when I bought them, but I was tugging in and I went through and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got a double yolk. And then the next egg, I got a double yolk. And then the third egg, I got a double yolk. And then I realized I had bought a specialty pack of eggs that were all double yolks and was not instantly as cool. But I was like, no way. I was like, oh, it's one of those things where you grab off the shelf.
Marla sent you.
Oh, well, thank you, Marla. We appreciate that. Okay, I'm actually going to keep my skillet. I'm going to put it on really low just to keep my bacon grease and my butter nice and things. But I don't want it too hot when I put my egg in. I want my pan warm. But if you have it too hot, what you're going to do is you're going to scald your eggs really fast before it has a chance to cook up. So go a little bit lower and slower with an omelet. with it. That way you're not going to burn it onto your pan. Okay, so let's whip these guys up. You just want to make sure you don't have any big bits of egg white left. And then you're going to want to salt your eggs now before you put it in, because eggs are a big part of your like your omelet, and so you don't want them to be undersalted. So just about 2 pinches of it on there, because we're going to have of course, our little meatier base in there. So that will have a lot of flavor as well. Let's do a flip of our potatoes. So there we go. We're going to start, and you can see it's starting to get the crispy edges. Now the trick with making sure your skillet potatoes get that nice crispy edge and isn't just like a fried greasy potato is you flip them, spread them back out, and then you leave them to let them cook for a while. You don't want to stir your potatoes. It's really just flip, flatten out, and let it sit. Okay. Now, if you like pepper, you could also throw in some pepper into your eggs. Garlic salt is also delicious, but my children don't like it in their eggs. Okay. And we're going to let this start cooking up. I'm going to have it over, now that I have it in, over about like a 4, so a medium low. Let that cook. Now, for omelets, I use this one to slotted transfer out, but you don't want to use a slotted spoon for your omelet. You're going to want to use more of a smoother, thinner spatula. So I'm going to use one I used on my skillet potatoes because I don't do the put a lid on, steam up your omelet, and fold it over. That doesn't make a very good omelet, in my opinion. I'm going to, as it cooks, after we get the base, I kind of pull up the edge, and then I tilt my pan to let the egg kind of fall under it, which helps prevent from getting like a really brown crust on your omelet, because then you're cooking the new batter there, and it helps get rid of any of that sliminess of the egg in the middle. So, there's so many different techniques for cooking it. This is kind of my favorite way of doing it. Now, while we are waiting, let's whip up our glaze to go on our cinnamon roll focaccia. So I'm going to use about, 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. Heavy cream is going to give you a richer, slightly thicker glaze. If you want it to be thinner, you can use, half and half or milk. And so depending on which one you use, one's will be thicker or thinner or, richer in the texture. And I'm going to use about a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I don't want too much because I don't want it to be very, very strong vanilla-y. Just subtle hints. Let me grab my whisk here. And then we're just going to whisk in our powdered sugar a little bit at a time. I'm going to start with about half a cup. We'll whisk it until we get this nice kind of consistency of Elmer's glue to drizzle over our, focaccia. Because, when you have cinnamon rolls, you've got frosting on it. Now, you could also make a cream cheese frosting and then just kind of make it kind of a little bit looser and then pipe it over if you love the cream cheese frosting on it. But I'm going to just stick with the classic. Okay, so here as you can see, I've got my egg starting to cook and form a base. And so what I'm going to do is just slide just like this. And you just kind of pick it up. And don't worry if you accidentally tear your egg while doing it. It's fine, because you're essentially just recreating the bottom all over again. And I do it all the way around to try to get as much of this down underneath. That way it allows it to kind of get a fresh shell on the bottom, and you don't overcook it. There. And then you just kind of let it sit and cook that base, that new base you put under it again, until it's ready. Let's see. I need a little bit more. And then we are going to grab our sourdough focaccia out of the oven here. So let me give this a good whip. I'm going to turn this down even lower while we're gone to grab this. And I will say it has such a great cinnamon flavor or scent to it. Okay. You can see all that brown sugar, ooey gooey deliciousness bubbling over this. And you see those little kind of bubble pinched ridges that we made when we kind of dipped our fingers in oil and put it all the way through.
You have a question? What temperature do you cook your eggs at?
My eggs, these are cooking right now. I had turned them down low right before when we walked away, but about a 4. So a medium low. You want to do it lower and slower because you don't want it to be too high. So here we pulled out our cinnamon roll focaccia. So I made like a basic kind of sourdough base with a little bit of cinnamon added to it. And then we did our dimpling over it. And then we made this lovely cinnamon roll sauce using butter, brown sugar, vanilla, and cinnamon that we drizzled over right before we popped it in the oven. And that's going to give you, you know, that ooey gooey center that you absolutely love. And like, you know, when you go to like those cinnamon roll places, gives you the deliciousness. So here we're just going to kind of pull up this kind of wet part. There we go. I always like to gently, don't push too firmly, but gently scrape along to get all of that gooiness off. But again, go low and slow. If you cook it too high, what will happen is you will burn the bottom of your omelet and you'll still have a gooey inside. And this way, and I like this method because it just allows you to just keep rebuilding that base for it. Okay, we have just a little bit more time left on that to steam up, and then we will be ready to add in our middle base for it. Let me grab this spatula. Again, we're going to scrape up the bottom as we flip. And you can see where we scrape off the bottom has these delicious crunchy part on our potatoes. And you can see they're starting to get translucent. They're less opaque. That means they're getting a little bit more tender and tender. When they're still white and you can't kind of see through them where they look more opaque, that means they're going to be firm and hard. So you don't want that. Now, before I pop my lid back on here, I'm going to sprinkle some seasoning over it. Not going to mix it in. I'm going to sprinkle it over, put the lid on, let those spices hydrate with that steam so it brings out the flavor. So we're going to do some onion powder here, which will give it a nice, really great savory flavor. And then we do have onions in there, but always adds a little bit more. And then, of course, my love, garlic salt. So a good shake over. And then we're going to use just this basic seasoning blend. This is the same as Mrs. Dash's original blend, but this is the bulk one from Costco. And we're going to do a nice little sprinkle over. And then I'm going to steam these on there, but we're not going to mix them yet. We'll mix them at the very end. Okay, I'm just checking to see if my base is all around. Looking great. So now we're going to add in, I'm going to turn this down low, a base layer of cheese, and then we're going to scoop in our meat, our filling. So I've got it. And this I put right down directly on the bottom here because that's going to allow it to melt. And then we're going to scoop our base that we already cooked. And you can see that cheese has melted on top of it. So this gives it a head start. And you don't have to wait to kind of cook it all the way through forever to get that like cheese gooey in the middle. And this is loaded with peppers, onions, sausage, and bacon. But you could really put any vegetable in there. You just got to saute it up. It's going to make a much better omelet when you saute it up. And now is always the magic time. And then we're just going to, push too hard. That's okay. It will still taste delicious. Let's hold it there. And just hold it for a second and let that cheese kind of melt together. And here is a beautiful 8-egg omelet, which is going to serve a lot of people. I don't do individual omelets for my kids and my family because that's too much work. 9. Oh, it was 9. Did I miscount? Of course. Oh, double yolk. You're right. That was my bonus egg. So, and that's always the best because the yolks just make the best, like scrambled eggs. They're saying if you want a richer scrambled egg, add in an extra yolk and it will give you just the best scrambled eggs. Okay. Look at these beautiful potatoes. We're going to cut up our green onions and toss them on. They are just about perfect. And then we're going to throw our bacon in as well. So here was that kind of our half pound of our bacon because we used half of it in our omelet. And then the other half is in the potatoes. But I didn't keep them in the potatoes. I took them out so that they wouldn't get overcooked because bacon, if you overcook it, it gets kind of rock hard. We're going to add in our green onions. Green onions, again, you want to add in towards the very end because they will wilt and lose their bright, lovely onion flavor if you put them in too soon. And then I'm just going to do it again. And I always love this because, again, it just adds a little pop of freshness to a richer potato. Let's give this a good mix. Mix that bacon in. And these are like the best breakfast skillet potatoes. You could also just fry up some eggs and crack them over and do a delicious skillet potato with them. Okay, off. Let's look at our beautiful focaccia over here. We got to drizzle on our frosting for it, our glaze. So I'm going to pick it up. I'm just going to bring it over here so I can make a little bit more room. I'm going to see if I can actually... If I can easily transfer it out to a cutting board, I'm going to, which I can. That way I can, when I cut it up for my kids, they'll be ready for it. I always am like, don't cut into my pans. And my children are really good about it. My stepdad is terrible. Anytime I see a cut mark in my pan, I know it was because of them. So I made sure to grease up the bottom of my pan. But when I'm making focaccia, I do not use parchment paper because I find the parchment paper will give you not a crispy bottom. There we go. So I'm just going to kind of pull it back first. You've got a little bit of that brown sugar caramelization on it. So I want to be able to slide this underneath it first. There we go. Beautiful. Look at this lovely crispy crunch there. And I'm just pulling it up because I don't want to flip it over because I do have that cinnamon roll goo on there and I want that to be delicious. Okay. You just you want to make sure you've got it all detached on the bottom before we perform our surgery and excavate it. Beautiful. Almost. It's got one little piece that's holding on. There we go. Voila. You guys can see underneath we've got this beautiful golden brown edge. And that sugar has that like sticky bun texture to it, which will be absolutely delicious. But do you see those just wonderful ridges there? It's just going to be delicious and chock full of our cinnamon flavor. And then we put our vanilla, powdered sugar glaze made with our heavy cream, which gives it a little bit of richness. But this is just kind of the topping of it. So this really makes it like that whole cinnamon roll feeling. This is going to be so delicious, especially because not only do we have that cinnamon sugar glaze over it, but we put cinnamon in the base of our sourdough. So we'll have that just lightly sweeter flavor to it. Beautiful. So we can get last bit out. And now we can serve up our breakfast. Let me grab my bread knife and our plate here. Just look how gorgeous this looks. It looks so delicious. Okay, let's start by cutting up our cinnamon roll focaccia. So I'm just going to cut a nice good chunk off. But look at those swirls of that cinnamon roll in here. So we've got our cinnamon sourdough roll focaccia that has our great sourdough starter in it and chock full of cinnamon, a cinnamon drizzle, and of course our vanilla frosting. We have our skillet potatoes full of peppers, onions, bacon, and russet potatoes, and then seasoned up with garlic, salt, and our Mrs. Dash's spices. And then, of course, we have our bacon, sausage, cheddar cheese, onion, pepper omelet, chock full of deliciousness for a wonderful, quick Saturday brunch for the family here. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking show every day, every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our recipes into on the link, or we upload all of our videos on the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes, you can just go to that link, search for what we cooked for. So we've got our sourdough cinnamon roll focaccia and omelet, and you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gears and gadgets. We've got our hex-clad pots and pans. I've got my cutting boards, my knives, my spatulas, all the different cool gadgets I use in the kitchen I've got in there if you're interested in what we use. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.